System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.
Today is Monday, August 5th. My name is Amin TMK, alongside Amosha Lil Tanky Sumler for Inner City Left. Amosha, how are you doing today, my friend? We've got a lot of news here on the docket.
Oh my.
Let's start here. Anthony Blinken, or as Benjamin Netanyahu would say, my friend Tony. He apparently told the G7 Iran and Hezbollah could attack Israel in the next 24 hours. This was yesterday. It seems as if we've been covering this, and obviously there's a lot surrounding this. But it looks like the world is sort of waiting, I say bated breath or whatever it is for whatever the response is that Iran and or Hezbollah and or the Houthis or what is your take on the state of where folks are at with this?
Yeah, I mean, waited with bated breath is almost too kind of statement. The markets are in free fall. The Israeli stock exchange is plummeting. The American stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, and the NASDAQ are both kind of hedging their bets. Friday was looking really bad. Now, look, that doesn't mean all of these things are 100% tied together, but these are things that are happening right now. Like Japan is in the largest dollar sell-off that's happened really in quite some time. The only person outselling them in dollars is the Chinese. Just getting rid of this is saying that they think something major is going to happen, right? Because this is how dangerous this is, that this has been allowed to be pushed to this point. The fact that the president of the United States has to be a person that you can lease his ear, but you can never own it, right? It's just too much relying on this. A war with Iran means no getting around it, a potential disruption of the petroleum trade, right? When Iran is one of the largest oil producers in the world, Saudi Arabia is one of the largest oil producers in the world, right? And both of these revenue sources would be threatened because you just don't know what's going to happen in a war, and the markets are freaking out. Let's also talk about the other elephant in the room as it relates to this, and we're going to come back to both of these later. In a truly global oil supply, it would be less of a problem, because what you would do is whatever oil you're missing from any potential disruption from Iran and the Saudis, right? You would just offset that by increasing your intake from another country. But the only other two countries that could possibly supply that kind of demand are Russia and Venezuela, right? So like that's a no-go. And so, yeah, the world holds its breath. Now, there's just levels to this, right? Another thing that has to be talked about is, at the very least, the amount of psychological damage that the Israelis are taking, because it's not just today. Blinken, every day this weekend, I went to sleep wondering, is it going to pop off, right? The moment that Israel killed that diplomat in Tehran, the capital of Iran, on the day of the presidential inauguration. I mean, I just have to say it again, just to remind y'all how we got to here, right? And that's just October 7th thing, right? Just trying to distill it down into the latest thing that has happened that's pushed this relationship to this point. Bibi Netanyahu has been going in front of the United Nations and going in front of the Americans since at least the 2000s, with these Bugs Bunny freaking diagrams saying that Iran is, they're just 1 month away from nuclear breakout capability, right? And the reality is, I mean, if they wanted to do it at this point, they probably could. It would be very difficult to stop them. And instead of finding constructive mechanisms of making sure that never happened, which for all of his flaws, you could say the JCPOA was exactly that, right? That was the Americans, the Europeans, Asia, Russia, Iran sitting down and saying, I don't want to do this. And you don't want me to do this. Let's find some common ground, right? When Trump tore that up, just like he did most of these policies, man, and again, this is a thing when people deify Trump, like he's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the thing that the right needs to look at. Trump made the world a much less safe place. He's the person that pulled out of the intermediate ballistic nuclear missile treaty, like of which Russia outnumbers America 10-1, but at least it was limited back then. Now there's no limits, right? I mean, so these are very serious things, right? That because again, the Americans wanted to increase their stockpile. They wanted to revitalize their deterrent. Well, the rest of the world ain't gonna sit and wait while you do it. It's pulled everybody in. It's pulled everybody in. You're seeing things with Turkey. You're seeing things with Saudi Arabia. Apparently, the Jordanian foreign minister went and had a conversation with the Iranian foreign minister, in which I was told, my sources have seen that essentially they told Jordan straight up, if you defend the Israelis, we will target you as well. Essentially, stay the fuck out of it.
Seems as if now we're getting to the nitty gritty here, where it's kind of put up or shut up moment. Like it's, because we have these places, like you mentioned, Saudi Arabia, I think Turkey is another one, that try to, Jordan is in the mix, although not as impactful a nation in terms, at least economically and probably militarily as well. And you kind of see like a lot of rhetoric always surrounding MBS. You'll see MBS amongst, Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz and Joe Biden as this villain of the movement. And we was watching earlier today, and they were mentioning Erdogan is like a blowhard and these things. I mean, do you think that it's difficult to try to navigate a diplomatic situation, which in a virtually seems to me as just a layman, a virtually impossible situation?
I mean, we could joke about it all day, right? I like to joke about Jordan because what they've done is they've put themselves. Let's make no mistake about it. Almost everybody in the Middle East is held hostage to this drama playing out between Israel and Iran. It should just be between Israel and Iran, but it's not. And, it's not wrong of Iran to look out and make sure they have allies, just like Israel has allies. When Iran attacks Israel, you can count on the Americans, you can count on the French, you can count on the British, all using whatever military resources they have to ensure that Israel is okay. Iran is just doing the exact same thing in a different way. They're using an asymmetrical response. That's just tactics. You don't want to go face to face in this particular way with this enemy because it's not Iran versus Israel, right? That's not what's happening. It's Iran versus the West and all that comes with that. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, when you have these small countries, even Sun Tzu talks about this, the best thing you can do is stay out of it. Jordan has not been allowed to stay out of it. Whatever you think about the Jordanian king, he is in an impossible situation because 50% of the Jordanian population is Palestinian. You know what they want. You know what I'm saying? You know what they want. But at the same time, you've gotten accustomed to a certain life of luxury, a certain style of living. And that ain't possible if you're not friendly with the Israelis because the Americans won't be friendly with you. So when the Americans, your friends who hold all your money and essentially ensure your continued reign, say, I think you need to use that Air Force that we sold you to help defend our friend, they have to do it. But the reality is that's a dangerous thing for him to do, continuing because of the will of his people. Say nothing more. Or how about the will of the people that live there? Okay. To say nothing of the pressures that come from that with countries like Iran, because now Iran has now said to them the quiet part out loud. We're not going to let you play like you had no other choice. You're going to make a choice. we're not asking you to help us, but we are telling you if you help them, we will hurt you. And whereas a country like Israel can count on the defense of the West, can a country like Jordan really count on that? And this is what the Saudis and the Turks understand infinitely better, right, than the king of Jordan. They have to talk this way because they understand, look, I think Mohammed bin Salman and Erdogan are exactly the opposite side of the same coin, right? Erdogan can talk a little bit tougher because he's in NATO. So he has certain, at least theoretical protections that MBS will never have. If someone comes to the attack of Turkey, even theoretically Israel, right? NATO is supposed to come, an attack on one is an attack on all. And this would cause an existential conflict for NATO. It would probably be the dissolution of NATO if Israel was to attack Turkey and Turkey decided to attack Israel in a real way.
We were talking a little bit about, and I was asking you about World War I and still being so confused about sort of how this goes down. And it seems as if now we are on a World War I trajectory for World War III, where there are just so many of these entanglements.
Small powers are moving big powers, and that's not supposed to happen. That is the danger of all of these alliances. This is why, again, saying nothing else about the American politics of the early 20th century, the thing that you have to concede is they were relatively isolationist. They were more preoccupied with stealing the lands of the indigenous people than making major power moves. Although it is important to acknowledge, even in that time period, they created their Monroe Doctrine, which essentially laid claim to the entire southern hemisphere of the Americas. You still have people like Tucker Carlson say things like, I can't believe that we're allowing other nations to set up bases in our backyard. South America is not your backyard. It's a whole continent. Think about the paternalistic kind of mind state that is, especially when
a single country away is in your backyard.
Right.
It's another sovereign nation.
Exactly. And so that's what you get. Now, meanwhile, you have someone like MBS who, again, no matter what else you want to say about MBS, the thing that you have to acknowledge about him is this: the boy is a capitalist. He's one of the wealthiest men in the world. He is the head of state. I mean, he's like real life Dr. Doom. You know what I'm saying? He has uncountable billions of dollars because he's the largest shareholder in Aramco, which is the largest oil company in the world. You know what I'm saying? His family owns that. That is his legacy to his people and his family. So he has unlimited amount of money. But the problem is all that money is in dollars, which means ultimately all that money is in American banks or European banks. And as they watch what continues to happen to Russia, he understands how tenuous his situation is. At any given moment, the West could just take all of your money. Remember always, more than a third of the world is under sanctions, American sanctions, right? And if you have American sanctions, EU sanctions are not far behind. G7 sanctions are not far behind, which means no longer doing business with those banks that hold your money. So he can only talk so tough. This is why de-dollarization is such an important thing. He wants to, Mr. Krabs, take my life, but don't take me money, right? He's trying to find a way to convert those dollars into something that's a little bit more secure, right? So, no, again, even assuming that he wanted to come to the defense of the Palestinians, which no one really knows, or whether or not he wants to come to the defense of Israel against the Houthis whenever they fire, no one really knows. But we do know that it's quite possible, in fact, highly probable, that he's getting calls from the Americans saying, if you do not come to our aid and support, who knows what might happen to your money? And that is a motivator, especially for a man like MBS.
And, it goes again to that point of causality. What we always talk about, Egypt, they elected, they went through enough elections till they picked the right president. But, MBS was one of many people who were in line for the next, in
the Bush years, they thought it was going to be Bandar. He was the one, They called him Bandar Bush.
Yeah, and you saw that one of the big things that came out when MBS was first named Crown Prince was this idea of there was all this, the Saudis were not allowing women to drive, and it was all this aspect. He was like, well, we're going to allow women to drive, and we're going to, bring movie theaters here, and it's going to be Disney films, and
now they're the heart of the fight industry. I mean, they've done that in under 10 years, right? Like, whoever thought that would not be Las Vegas, Nevada, right? And now Riyadh season, that's the biggest thing in the world if you're a boxing fan.
Yeah, and it seems as if, we see this everywhere. When you align yourself with the United States, it always comes back to bite you. And we're seeing their deep ties to the American dollar as one of the reasons that's kind of got them in this catch-22 of what do we do? Our population obviously wants this, but financially, this is what suits us or what benefits us at the moment. And, we talked about this earlier because in America, like the backlash of the people is irrelevant. We have a military state here in the United States. There's no amount of pressure the American people could put on the American domestic military to do anything. But as we see in a place like Bangladesh, they just have been going through several weeks of protests and several days of intense protests. And we see now that their prime minister, Sheikh Hassani, flees. Army says the interim government is to be formed. I don't know. Again, I mean, it just talks about like what political pressure can be done from the people. Right. And other governments have to contend with that.
And that's the reality, right? Like when people talk about, the protest in Venezuela, it's like, where are they now, right? Because what you see now through the streets is million people protest. Million people marching, for not Chavez, but
for Maduro.
You know what I'm saying? Like for one day after the election, you have these guys out there doing all of these, at this point, staged protests where people are faking being shot and whatnot, while now and having major disruption. But then they go home because you can't keep paying those guys to do that, right? Meanwhile, the will of the people. And of course, look, you cannot escape the popularity of Maduro because Maduro has one thing he can always do at any given time. He can say two things. He can say, I am the one Hugo Chavez trusted. And if you loved Hugo, trust Hugo. And two, we are one of the most oil-rich countries in the world. The reason why we don't have wealth is because the United States is blocking our wealth by not allowing our market to develop and by continuously trying to destabilize us with sanctions. And so long as those sanctions are there, you'll always have that excuse. Look, no one knows what Venezuela could be allowed to be if the Americans didn't punish other nations for doing business with them, right? Like
you can add so many countries to that list. And they've mentioned that. We talked about this with Matt too. At the entire region solidarity with Cuba, and the crippling sanctions on Cuba. You have to see. It's always like, oh wow, it's so classic down there. They have the cars from the 50s or blah blah blah. That's not fair. That's not okay. Hey, if you want to drive a car from the 50s and you can maintain it, hey, that's great. But it is unfair that just because they choose to do their government in this way, that the United States or whatever is so hell-bent on changing it. And we saw that with the propaganda campaign. I want to just read this to you and I'll just give it right back to you. If you win elections, this is from Uphold Reality. If you win on Twitter, if you win elections but nationalize the oil, you're a dictator. If you ban elections but sell your country to BlackRock, you're a Democrat.
Yeah, no, that's it. I saw something like that similar where now because the Nigerians have kicked out, the Mali government has kicked out. What they did was they ended diplomatic relations with Ukraine because recently their forces have been attacked by the Tuareg specialists, which were enforced and enhanced with Ukrainian special forces, right? And so they had a big speech where they called them a bunch of neo-Nazis. Once again, you can't make this up. and said that we've cut off diplomatic relations. And now all of a sudden, when people talk about them, they're the junta. Well, how is Zelensky not a junta? You're talking about a military government and I say military government because they're only in power because they've continued to extend martial law. That's a military government. He's passed his term limits. At this point, so is Parliament. You're saying that the Venezuelan election was rigged. If it's so easy to rig, why then hasn't Zelensky at least rigged an election? Right? The reality is they know that Venezuela's elections were not rigged. And they know if they ran Zelensky right now, unless they rigged them, he would not win. And you don't know what you're going to get if you bring someone else in.
I mean, like, again, we don't have to have this discussion because, again, heard it all before. We were just talking about this with the, similarities between a Kamala and Obama and a Sarah Palin and, so it's like we were talking about, earlier you were talking about Iran having a nuclear weapon. Now it's the new State Department, favorite comment. Right. And it's like, are we going back to weapons of mass destruction in Iraq is the reason that we have to invade this sovereign nation who's obviously in conflict with Israel, who's obviously tied to the United States. And as the current president,
and in conflict because Israel continues to cross red lines. I mean, they're murdering diplomats. That's just, are we going to have rules or are we not going to have rules? That's the thing. And that's the thing that Israel forces the existential answering of. Will there be rules or will there not be rules? Because Israel wants to say, well, there are rules for the West. But the world ain't going to let that crack. And what they don't understand is in Israel, what that really means is the rules that matter are the rules that we've set for ourselves as our own culture, as our own community. And that's what the Americans are trying to float as well, right? As it relates to trying to protect Bibi Netanyahu and, of course, Israel, the nation, from the ICC and the ICJ, respectively. Well, we reject international law, but you say that you're a rules-based order. You cannot do both of these things. There can't be rules in your country that say genocide is okay, and now all of a sudden there's no international jurisdiction. It just isn't how international law works.
Yeah, it's called rules-based order, which means do as I say, not as I do. It's a very paternal vibe, we talk about that. I wanted to get into this last thing. We were covering a lot today. There's a lot to cover. And look, we apologize for those who are waiting on our Ukraine and Russia update. We promise we're going to get that to you probably by this week.
It's just how fast the news is happening, man. Like we have been trying to talk about Bangladesh for almost 2 weeks and just other things kept happening, and yeah.
It's just incredible every day. It is again, I just want to say, it feels like the world is kind of bursting here at the seams because there's just so much that humanity is refusing to allow that. Anyway, I don't want to go off into a rant, but I do want to talk about this. There is, I don't know what to, I've seen this word and maybe you can tell me more about it. Pogroms, lynch mobs. Across the U.S. UK, U.S. Freudian slip. UK. If you listen to Elon Musk, right? People just dead up trying to hurt people. You're seeing going into Muslim neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, tearing up cars, trying to fight people, trying to kill them. This is scary stuff, right?
People have been stabbed. And what's crazy about that is less than 1 week earlier, you had the first Palestinian welterweight champion in the UFC ever. And that happened where? Manchester, right? Manchester, United Kingdom.
Correct.
And a week later, you have again, I'm not trying to find some causality behind that, but it just shows you how dangerous this is for people that are not white people in the West, right? People are being beaten. People are being stabbed all through Britain. There are literal lynch mobs all throughout northern England attacking people that they see as immigrants. 2 different hotels that have been housing immigrants in the UK have been set on fire by far-right extremists. And this is still not in the news, right? I got to hear about Venezuela every day. Meanwhile, Black people and Muslims in the UK are being beaten and stabbed, and people are trying to lynch them.
Yeah, it's a scary time. It's a scary world. I think it's important to, excuse me, acknowledge China has come out with a statement saying they're extremely concerned with the civil unrest in the UK on attacks on ethnic minorities. We urge the UK government to do everything in their capacity to ensure the safety of minorities. China reserves the right to intervene if the situation in the UK does not improve.
I saw that tweet. I don't know if that came from the official government of China. You know,
it's okay. It's all right. I'm just saying.
Even the joke of it, though, is great, right? Because this is how the West talks to other nations, right? Just to even hear that language, right? Because that's the reality. This is what interference looks like, right? China actually officially has a non-interference policy as far as their foreign policy goes. But again, it's just a great joke to rib at the quote unquote rules-based order, because everyone knows in the West, it's bursting at the seams. As you said, this whole global order is bursting at the seams because Israel is driving the chariot off the cliff and dragging us all into the darkness. That just can't be escaped. It doesn't make sense for a nation with the population of Israel to try to make war with a nation the size of Iran. And when you say, oh, it's conflict on both sides, no. Iran is not assassinating ambassadors from Israel. They're just
I mean, like, let's put into context what happened. Your president tragically died in an accident, not just killing him, but the foreign minister and other people as well. Tragic loss of life. Dubious accident. You have a new president, reformer. Things is going to change. It's going to get better. You're inviting the negotiator for the Hamas ceasefire. And you kill him in his house. I mean, is this the red wedding, for God's sakes, man? You know, like this, you don't do this. And it's absurd now that we had to watch that UN Security Council meeting where people are like, and Hezbollah, did Hezbollah do that to any Israeli official? It is insane, the hypocrisy that we have to deal with and still discuss this.
And they're watching ops on family members, people that are not even necessarily connected to the apparatus of government.
I mean, they just don't realize that they're so okay with it because this is what happened under Obama. You were at a wedding one day and somebody at the wedding had a tie to some sort of terrorist organization.
Or might have worked with them at some
point, and a drone just hits them and your two cousins and the bride. And now you weren't a radical person, but you might be now. So again, we're talking about the not endless supply, but the continuing supply of the resistance movements all around the Middle East. It's like you're just radicalizing people. Why are you doing this?
That's what it is.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, my good friend, before I do my little outro here?
Man, it's a beautiful day somewhere. Try to find the beauty in your day. Go out and be gentle to yourself, love on someone, remind them that they matter, because the system is not predicated on that happening. Be the joy in somebody's life and be some joy for you.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I want to give a big shout out to our podcast listeners. What's up? We love y'all. We know you can't see our gesticulations and our beautiful faces, but we're on the internet in other ways. I want to give a shout out to our Patreon members. Hey, if you got time, go in there. You can sign up to our Patreon. We even have free subscriptions, and as little as $5 a month if you got it. Support the team. We're not going anywhere. I want to give a shout out to Dubsy22, Nicole Hedges, Jay Goulart, 94, No Ground, Robbie, Paula, Lissa, Lauren, Suzette, and Dennis. We appreciate y'all. I am Amin TMK for Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.